This is Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana University basketball discussion, hosted by Inside the Hall founder and editor, Alex Bozich. Since 2007, Inside the Hall has been trusted by IU fans across the globe to be the one-stop shop for IU basketball news, commentary, and analysis. Join us over at InsideTheHall.com. That's InsideTheHall.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink, and I'm pleased to be joined by Brian Butch, former Wisconsin big man. He's tells me before we hit record here, he's hosting 2 radio shows every day up in Wisconsin. He's also on the call Sunday afternoon for Indiana, North Alabama. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but this is the second straight year that you called that game. So a little odd that you had that same 2 teams 2 years in a row, but welcome to the show, Brian. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I did have those guys last year as well. I'm excited about this Hoosier team. I think they've got what makes it exciting is their ability to defend. You need to be able to defend in the Big Ten. You're going to have last-second possessions. You're going to have a crunch time, last 4 minutes a game. How do you execute? There's question marks with this Hoosier team. Are they going to be able to make some shots? They did against North Alabama on Sunday, and they looked really good doing that. But as long as you defend, you're going to be in games. And I think that's what is the exciting part and should give Hoosier fans hopes early on here.
I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, obviously for Indiana, it was a big kind of change coming from what Tom Crean did to Archie Miller. We're year 4 now in Archie Miller. And I think there's a certain segment of the fan base who's wondering kind of when a breakthrough is going to happen or if it's ever going to happen. The first 3 seasons, last year they probably would have made the tournament. Obviously, COVID changed things. There was no tournament. So there's some expectations this year. But you make an interesting point that he's kind of building this with the defensive mentality first. What have you seen in terms of you obviously were impressed with how they played defensively. What stands out to you that maybe makes them better suited, I guess, to win in the Big Ten under this style of play than maybe they were previously?
Yeah, I even think last year, and we'll use North Alabama as an example. Now, I know it's not a great example, but last year they were trying to defend. They didn't defend nearly as well. Now I saw them defending as 5. And I think when I say 5, it's all 5 players, right? Like they move on a string. When one moves over, the help side's there. They're moving with the pass and the flight of the ball. So for me, when I look at that's to me the sign of a good team is when you have all 5 guys on the same page. Now, they did that with freshmen in the game as well. And I think to me the biggest thing when you look at this is to be able to insert freshmen and still run the system the correct way. That's when you know some teaching's going on. That's when you know there's buy-in. And I think as a unit, them guarding as 5, when they needed to hedge, they hedge. When they needed to switch, they switched. There was really good communication early on. And I think that's the signs early on, December 16th, non-conference games that, you're starting to have kind of a good base on the defensive end.
The one thing that's kind of stood out to me, like from this Indiana season so far, they've played 6 games, but 4 of them already have been against high major teams. You look around the Big Ten right now, and there's a lot of teams that I think we saw it last night with Minnesota, right? They hadn't really been tested. They go to Illinois and they finally play a good team, and the results aren't what they wanted, obviously. How much do you think that's going to help them going into Big Ten play to have already, they played those 3 games in Asheville as part of Maui. They played at Florida State. It feels like that may give them a little leg up, at least early in the season, on some of these other teams that maybe haven't played as tough of a schedule.
Well, let's go back to last year. Your non-conference schedule was not good early on, right? Like it was really easy. You guys had, I think it was your MTE, but it was at home, and you didn't really play anybody. But that last year, it fit what the Hoosiers needed. They needed to get confidence. They needed to know how to play together. This year, with who you have, with Jackson-Davis back, with a group that's together, you needed a challenge early. And I think this is the thing that I was impressed with, the growth from the Texas game to the Florida State game. Both were losses, right? But I saw a lot of growth within a week. And I think when you have guys that are older, guys that understand it, guys that have been through it, you can see those bigger leaps of improvement within a week. And I think that's what I saw. So I love the way that was scheduled. The North Alabama game, yeah, you throw that in there because you need one of those. For me, that was a confidence builder. Is Franklin going to be able to continue to shoot the ball at that level? Well, playing a game against North Alabama and making as many as he did, I think that gives him confidence. I think that gives some of your younger guys confidence. So that's why you schedule a game like that. But you also get confidence by kind of getting punched in the face a little bit too, like realizing we're not as good as we think we are. We need to improve here and here and here. And I think that also makes especially young kids, listen to the coaching staff a little bit more. Because the coaching staff is able to see the weaknesses. They know what the weaknesses are of the team. The question is, do the players know what the weaknesses are? And are they willing to listen and to adjust to that? And I think with the schedule that's in place and that has been played so far, they've had to listen. You've had a couple of good wins. You've had a couple of bad losses. And I take that back, not bad losses, but a couple of losses there where all of a sudden, well, if we want to do what we want to do, and you heard that from Jackson-Davis, is we want to be different, right? In the press conference after the Florida State game, we want to be different. Over the last 10 years, this isn't the same Hoosier program. It isn't the same Hoosier team. Well, if you want to be different, you got to do things differently. And I think listening to what Archie Miller's putting in place with kind of the group that they have, I think they can be special.
It's funny you mentioned that comment from Trayce Jackson-Davis, because I was going to bring that up to you. To have a sophomore who's leading on the court like he is with his play, but to also, after a game like Florida State, for the first thing that comes to mind for him is these are the kind of games that we have to win, not making excuses and just kind of owning up to the fact that they didn't get the job done. Does that surprise you to see something like that out of such a young guy? I mean, it seems like, last year he was a freshman. He had a really good year, but we didn't hear that type of leadership from him off the court. We didn't really see him being as emotional, kind of getting guys in line on the court. I mean, does that show growth? And are you surprised at all that he's kind of been able to take that leap already just a couple games into a sophomore year?
I guess my question first to you would be, did they have any leaders last year? And I don't think so. I don't think there was. Devontae Green.
When he was making shots, Devontae Green was a leader when he's making shots, right? But that's not a leader.
Exactly. But there were seniors, right? Your seniors are supposed to be your leaders. I don't think you got much leadership out of them, right? I just got some good play at times, but I don't think the leadership was there. So as a freshman that's leading the team as far as playing goes, the next step is then to have your voice. And Jackson-Davis did that. Like last year, he was your best player. And for me, I look at this and say, now he's your best player, but now he also has a voice. Like he's got the confidence to know he's the best player on the floor. Now you look at him and say, okay, now I've got to bring the rest with me. I got to bring the group with me. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to change this, I'm going to bring everybody else with me. Well, there's a way to do that. You do that with your play. He's doing that. But then you got to do it with your voice and the expectations. And now he's added that part of it. So does it surprise me? No, because last year there was no leadership. And I think any great basketball player knows you can't do it by yourself. You've got to bring others with you. You've got to be that leader. So it doesn't surprise me because of that. He kind of sat back, was the best player on the floor, but didn't have the voice. Now you add that maturity to him as far as, hey, this is the year I've got to take the step in the other direction.
So you've been in the situation that he's in terms of kind of growing through your career and knowing what it's like to be the young guy and then later in your career a leader on some really good teams. We always hear the word leadership thrown out, right? At this point, it's kind of like a cliche. Everyone has a different definition of it. But one thing that I've always heard coaches talk about is the best teams are player-driven instead of coach-driven. How big of a deal is that in your mind? And you mentioned, I bring that up because you talked about last season, and I agree with you. There wasn't, in terms of player leadership, and Archie Miller's trying to build a program. I think it makes it tougher for him when he is still kind of have to, control everything with what he's saying on the sideline. He doesn't have that guy on the court that gets people together. How important is it, do you think, for Indiana to actually have some players now that are maybe stepping forward and embracing that, other than guys who are just, it's great to name a senior a captain, but if they're not actually doing anything in terms of leadership on the court, it's just a name. It's just a name tag, right? It doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah, no, we talked a little bit about during the broadcast too. I think the best teams that I've played on were teams that we coach each other. Bo Ryan, Greg Gard, Greg as an assistant, Bo as the head. They were worried about coaching. They didn't have to manage egos. I think some of that happened last year with Archie Miller. I think he was trying to figure out, okay, I got to get Devontae to play at the level that Devontae is supposed to play at all the time. I got to do this. I got to do this. When a coach, I got to get Rob to do this. I got to get Rob, all these other things. And those are just two names I threw out there. I mean, there was other guys that you're balancing. I don't think there's as much of that this year. And Archie can worry about coaching. And I think we're starting to see that with this Hoosier team. When you look at some of the sets they're running, they're different sets than last year. And you can see that there's more development as far as coming in every day, like different, the game plan. I love what Archie's doing. And I think it's because there's more time spent on it, to be honest, versus having to worry about everybody else. And how can I get the most out of this guy? How can I get the most out of this guy? How do I control this ego? What do I have to do differently for this? I don't think there's nearly as much of that this year. And I think that's why this Hoosier team can be good, because you've got leadership in Jackson-Davis. You've got, different. Rob Finney, I think, is stepping up and playing a little bit of a leadership role, maybe, right? Like, where's it going to come from? How's it going to happen? But I do think it's more than last year, and I think you're starting to see the benefits of that from the Hoosier team. I go back to it, but the best teams that I were on, the championship teams that I was on at Wisconsin, it was us coaching each other, us holding each other accountable. As much as a coach wants to yell, players tune out of the coach. It is like, it's just the facts. But you never tune out a teammate, and at least the good teams don't. And I think that's why those voices carry so much louder of importance.
As a player, going back to what Trayce said after the Florida State game, if you're another player in that locker room and you read that quote or you hear him say that, do most guys take that favorably and take it as a challenge? I mean, it sounded like, he prefaced it with, it's all love, but we got to do this. So is that the right way to go about that?
When you talk about it at the end and you're going after each other, you're a competitor. If you can't handle it, get out of the kitchen. The kitchen's hot, but if you want to win, you got to play. And that's the reality. And I think when you start holding people accountable, that's the key. And that's the key to success. So I was fine with it. I think those arguments are good. I think they're healthy. Is everybody going to like it? Probably not. But you got to know who you want in your foxhole, right? Like who do you want to go to battle with? You want a guy that's going to fold, or you want to? Because I'm sure the people that Jackson-Davis went after weren't quiet and just sat back there and took it. I'm sure there was a little bit of a verbal argument back and forth and heated arguments, but that's great. That's what you should have on December 16th. Those are the things where you're finding out about each other still, because the season's new. Now, you don't want it all the time, right? Like that, I'll say that's my counter. You don't want it all the time, but I don't think you have that all the time. I think that was a game that was emotional, that Indiana played pretty well in, and they came on the wrong side. I think it was a great moment to have. I remember a moment like that at Wisconsin. We were in Cameron Indoor my senior year and just got blasted. We didn't play well. And we walked in to the locker room, and we just started going. Everyone was going after each other. Like, it was one of those moments. And Bo normally came in right away after, and it was about probably 10 minutes before he came after, and we still were hot at each other, all of us. And he walks in the door, and enough, and we still keep going. And we didn't even realize he was there. He was yelling, for us to stop. But that was a turning point, because we got blasted, and then we realized, well, this isn't what we want. About 3 weeks later, we go to Texas. We went on a last-second shot. They were ranked top 15 in the country, and then that propelled us to win a Big Ten championship.
Hey, it's Jared, just jumping in here real quick so that we can talk about Home Field Apparel, your friends at homefieldapparel.com. Christmas is coming up. You need to do your Christmas shopping, and homefieldapparel.com is definitely a stop that you need to make, both for the IU fans on your Christmas list, but also for anybody else, because it's not just IU stuff that they have right now, and they do have the best line of IU apparel, football logos, basketball logos. I mean, they have so much great stuff there for the IU fans on your list, but also they have over 90-plus schools. So, Home Field Apparel's whole thing is they go and they dig into the archives of different colleges and universities, pull out these old logos and brand marks that haven't been used in a while, put them on the comfiest material, whether it's the T-shirts, the sweatshirts, whatever it is. Their material is so comfy, so nice, so high quality. and you're going to find something for everybody. So go to homefieldapparel.com, use our promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, and you will get 20% off your entire order. So the IU page for all the IU apparel, and then you can browse all the other colleges and universities, and you're sure to find something for pretty much everybody on your Christmas list. Because even if you have someone on your Christmas list that didn't go to one of the colleges or universities Home Field does, they have so many cool, unique logos, you could probably find something for that person anyway. And if nothing else, just get them a comfortable hoodie or the comfortable joggers. I mean, it's such comfortable stuff. Gets you ready for the wintertime. Go do it now. Homefieldapparel.com. Use that promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K. You will get 20% off your entire order. That's homefieldapparel.com, promo code B-R-I-N-K.
We talked a lot about Trayce, but I'm curious for your thoughts on a couple other guys on this team that seem to be important players right now. I think it's important for Indiana to have something reliable beyond just Trayce, right? There's teams that can be star led, and that can be, you can have a player that's really good enough to take you on a deep tournament run, but you also want to have guys who are there, your second, third, fourth options who are consistent, reliable. And two guys that I've looked at so far on this Indiana team that are really not proven over their careers to be this yet, but so far this season I look at and say these might be guys that you can count on a semi-regular basis are Thompson and Armaan Franklin. What do you see out of those two guys in terms of growth over last season? Anything stand out from you calling the game the other day about either one of those players?
Yeah, as far as Race, he's the junkyard dog. He's the energy guy, right? He does everything that you don't have to ask of a player as far as the loose balls. Now, the thing for me is, can he stretch the floor enough? Is he a consistent shooter to space the floor? I know a lot of Hoosier fans, can Joey, if he gets healthy, can he and Trayce play together? Well, the same question, can Race and Trayce play together? I think the answer to that is yes. I think Race is a little bit more active than Joey. Joey's a heavy-footed at times. Now, very effective in the post, but a little bit where Race is able to get up and down the floor a little bit, run a little bit more in transition, be that front rim runner that then puts pressure on the rim. That's where Trayce can get into the trail position, leads to a little dribble handoff action to kind of get the offense a little bit of a different look. As far as Franklin, what I like about him, and again, this is just off the North Alabama game, I think he can hit some shots. Right now, obviously, that's one game. Where you consistently, how are you able to do that? But I love the defensive effort he gives you. He can guard. And I think that, to me, is what really is such a valuable piece to this Hoosier team is you have to start on the deep. No matter what happens on the offensive end, and maybe it's because I played at Wisconsin, but you had to defend first. If you didn't defend, you weren't going to play. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if you could score. You had to defend. And I love what Franklin's able to do there. Now, being able to space the floor, take steps in the next direction, I think that's what's in store for him this year. I really do. And then I think that helps the offense. Anytime spacing equals great offense. It's so simple to say it, but I think it's so crucial for this Hoosier team because they need space. And why do they need space? Because Jackson-Davis needs room to operate. If they don't space the floor and they don't have shooters, good luck. I mean, they're going to pack that paint, and Trey's going to have a long day.
It could be a repeat of the Romeo Langford, Juwan Morgan season, right? I mean,
exactly.
And you kind of led me right into my next question about shooting. Indiana fans, I think, are a bit perplexed by the fact that this is year 4 and it still doesn't seem like Indiana has reliable perimeter shooting. They're looking for explanations on why that is. Is it not being emphasized enough in recruiting? Are guys not getting in the gym enough to work on shots? I'm curious specifically because you've been around some really good shooters. You've been in a program that really emphasized it. Do you think when you look around just in college basketball in general, and this is a pretty big question, I'm not sure if there's an answer to it, but is shooting something that you really have to get in recruiting, or is it something that has to be developed? Is it a combination? I think it's an interesting conversation because it's the one thing I look at Indiana right now, and you mentioned it's something that can really hold them back from reaching their potential if they cannot effectively space the floor.
Yeah, no, so it's a good question. Yes, some of it's recruiting. Sometimes you just want to go get a guy that's a shooter that can space the floor. I mean, there's a value in that. If you put the ball in the basket, I've never had her coach say, you know what, you make too many shots, I can't play you. Right? Like, I've never heard that. That'd be a new one. If someone out there has heard it, please let me know. That'd be a new one for me. So there is part of that recruiting. You want to get guys that have been shooters. Yeah, I'd say that's fair. But also, you got to have guys step up and make shots. I mean, it's not – I love Hoosier fans, and I love being able to call games because you guys are knowledgeable. Like, you understand the game. Like, if you don't know your stuff, when you call a Hoosier game, they're going to let you know because you're going to make yourself sound like an idiot because you guys know the game of basketball. That's what I love about it. But I also think at times you overthink it. Like, you want to talk about why they're not making shots. Some of his guys just need to step up and make shots. Florida State game, Rob Finney, corner three. That's in it right before Trayce gets the tap in that would have put you guys ahead. Rob just needs to make the shot. There's no strategy. That's not Archie Miller's fault. Like, it's a great play. It's a great set. It's a great look. It was a kick out to a wide open shooter. Rob just got to make the shot. Like, that's it. That, you know what I mean? Like, that's all there is to it. So there's the balance of that. Now, I do think you can turn yourself into a great shooter. Like, with shooting, it's about reps. What as far as how do you become a great shooter? You get in the gym and you rep it out. There's 3 great shooters. I run a lot of youth basketball camps in the summertime, and I always ask the kids this question: does Steph Curry shoot the same way as Klay Thompson? Does Klay Thompson shoot the same way as Kevin Durant? Right, when they were all in Golden State, all 3 of those guys shoot the ball different. Are they all great shooters? Yeah, right. But they're all reps. Like, it's all about them getting the rep over and over and over and over again. And I think that's what you look at. And then there's the confidence aspect of it, right? You got to believe you're going to make the shot. You can't just shoot it and aim. Like, you don't aim. When you're a shooter, shoot. Guys that aren't good shooters, they aim. And for me, that's the way I look at it. So recruiting's part of it, and then it's guys just stepping up and making shots. Should they get in the gym more and all this stuff? Yeah, that's all part. But they got to make shots. Yeah,
that's the explanation that Archie Miller's given for a while now, and I think for some reason some fans don't want to accept it. But I don't want to think. I also think it's sometimes you look for excuses, and ultimately I think some guys have to look in the mirror. And I look at a guy like, and this is going back to obviously Crean, but I remember when Victor Oladipo, and this is an anomaly example because he went on to be the number 2 pick, but when he came to Indiana, he couldn't make a 3-pointer reliably, ever. And by the time he left, he was, high 30s, low 40s% 3-point shooter. Why was that? It wasn't some magical thing. It was the fact that he got into the gym, emphasized it, and he wanted to be great. So I do think on this roster, you look at Armaan Franklin getting some confidence the other day. We'll see if he can springboard that going forward. We'll see if Anthony Leo, maybe a freshman, can knock down some shots. Trey Galloway, Christian Lander, all those guys I think are important. Go ahead.
But they've got to defend first. They've got to understand that. Like, that's it. So, and I get this. Everyone wants to talk about the offensive side of the ball. Well, this is what they can bring offense. This is what they can do. This is what – no. If they can't defend first, they're not going to see the floor. Archie Miller's cut kind of from the same cloth as a Bo Ryan, right? Like, Archie's old man is they're cut kind of from the same cloth a little bit. So you have to defend first to play.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with Lander. Coming into the season, he's a 5-star recruit, right? He moved up a year. He's a point guard. So I looked at that right off the bat and said, not only is he coming in trying to play the most difficult position there is maybe to play in the Big Ten, which point guard, trying to run a team when you're on the court, he's also a year younger than most of his freshman counterparts, so he's behind there. And I think defensively so far, there's just been a lot of instances where if you slow down the tape and you go watch back, that he's not really getting it. One thing I wonder with this Indiana team relying on so many of those freshmen, do you think they have the depth that they're going to need when they get into some of these tough games against Big Ten teams? Michigan State, Wisconsin, these teams are going to, there's no, I guess, dip your toes in the water moment in this Big Ten. It's relentless.
Oh, yeah, and you guys are in it now. I mean, Butler coming up and everybody, yeah, you're in it now. Like, it's over with. It's time to go. It's go time right now. Is there enough depth? I'll answer it this way. When you look at this freshman group right now, December 16th, as we do this, it'll be much different by the time January 16th is. It'll be much different by February 16th. There will be growth. And I think that's what you're looking for with your freshman group. So will there be depth? Not as much December 16th as there will be January 16th, but I think there's enough in the cabinet there that you guys will be just fine as far as Hoosiers. I think you've got young guys that are starting to learn how to play a little bit on the offensive end, but if you have to rely on a 7-guy rotation, you'll rely on a 7-guy rotation too. You know what this is, and that's where I think Archie Miller and staff, and especially the training staff, knows this is how much, and this is where it's changed a lot from when I've played. Workload and monitoring how many minutes and what we can do in practice and this, and we're going to have it be a shooting day today versus a contact day. And there's a lot of that going on. Do I agree with all of it? I don't know. You play. Like, you go out there and you play, whether you're tired or not, you get to hoop. So for me, I look at it as, I think there is enough, but if you got to shrink that bench a little bit, play guys long minutes, you ride them. Because you look at what the expectations are. It's to get back to the NCAA tournament. Even though last year I thought there could have been a run maybe from that team. I think this year with shooting better, because you had Devontae, right? Like, Devontae can get hot. He can win you some games now. He can lose you some games, but he can win you some games too.
Right.
So I think that's kind of what this is. And so, yeah, I think there's enough there. I think it might take some time. I don't think you're going to get those answers right away here, middle of December. But middle of January, I think you're going to see that improvement, especially from that freshman class.
I want to talk about the Big Ten as a whole at some point here, but I just want to ask you, the last couple of weeks, I think, and obviously don't want to get political or any of the discussions about COVID, but just in terms of how it's being managed from a college basketball perspective, my opinion, they're doing the best job they can with a situation that seems to be impossible to have a right or wrong answer. But there's been obviously differing opinions. I think Northern Iowa and Duke have kind of said we're not going to play any more non-conference games. We're going to go home. Other coaches have kind of said we've got to play on. Just in general, do you feel like the season is as normal as it could be right now based on the circumstances that are going on? Do you think there's anything that could be done differently, or do you think this is just a situation where we've got to just try to move forward the best we can and hopefully get to the tournament at the end? Because that's really the ultimate goal of this, is not having 2 straight years without an NCAA double tournament. You look at all the other major sports, none of them missed out on their kind of championship round. I mean, the NBA finished, the NFL is going to go on, Major League Baseball had the World Series. Well, the NCAA tournament didn't happen last year. 2 straight years of that happening, I feel, would be catastrophic potentially for college basketball. Yeah, no, I think they're doing a great job. I do. I think what they're doing is fantastic. As far as what Coach K said, I don't necessarily – I understand where he's coming from. I think it's more of an institutional thing where, in a conference, what is the ACC? It's not an NCAA thing. Yeah. But I'll say this, and this is where I kind of disagree with Coach K saying players need to go home for holiday. I played 5 years at Wisconsin. I was home for the holidays twice, maybe. I was never home for a Thanksgiving. And I was home for maybe 1 or 2 Christmases, and that's because I lived in Wisconsin and grew up in Wisconsin. So as basketball players, we've never been home for the holidays. So you can't tell me it's that important now to get home for the holidays. Yeah. Because it's basketball players never did it, at least when I played, right? So like I really wasn't home for the holidays. So to me, that's one of those that you kind of throw in there on top of COVID to make it sound like, well, we got to get our guys home. Well, did you always get your guys home, or is it just now? Because the Maui Invitational was over Thanksgiving, so they were never home for during Thanksgiving ever. Right. So like why? And Christmas you were getting – so that to me is where it's a little bit – but as far as the way they're handling it, these kids are getting tested daily. I mean, a lot of me and you, we're not getting tested daily. I might be walking around with it and not even know, where these guys and these kids will know one way or the other. Now I think they're doing everything possible to not catch COVID and go ahead and figure out all those sorts of things. So
I actually give kudos to the Big Ten. I give kudos to each program by themselves to have their own regulations in place. And I give them a lot of credit. Getting through non-conference will be the toughest to get through because each conference has a different testing protocols, different rules, different times, and how all that works. And some of these smaller schools, they're only testing 2-3 times a week. Big Ten.
If that, some of the low majors might be testing weekly or less.
Exactly.
They just don't have the money for it. I mean,
exactly. So as far as what are you doing and how is it going? Yeah, I think you push through with this because I think you're talking about college kids as well here. And college kids, if they didn't have a reason not to do what college kids do, they'd be doing what college kids do. Well, the basketball players don't. They have a reason not to do those things. They have a reason to stay home. They have a reason not to go to parties. They have a reason not to, mingle and all those other So yeah, I think everything that and every way that everyone's doing it, it's as good as it can be. There's some flaws for sure, but are we at a decent point? I think so.
Yeah, and I think the one, obviously I follow Indiana. You played at Wisconsin, but you look around the whole Big Ten, and I think one reason the Big Ten may have a little bit different perspective on this is they've handled it so well so far, right? I mean, we know that there's going to be shutdowns, but so far Indiana's season in general has felt quote unquote normal because they've played all of their scheduled games. They haven't had anything, stopped or shut down to this point, and so it looks like things are going as planned. I think some of the frustration that you see on social media and people saying, well, things aren't going well is obviously people who are following programs that maybe are getting shut down frequently. That's frustrating, but that's just the reality of the situation. It doesn't mean that we need to stop or do anything when 80% of the games are still getting played at this point.
Yeah, and you look at Wisconsin, they lost a game to Northern Iowa. They lost a game to Louisville. Well, guess what? They ended up scheduling a Rhode Island team that's pretty good. They scheduled a Loyola Chicago team, which is pretty good, and they're going to come back and play Louisville again this Saturday, excuse me. Yeah. So, Wisconsin, and I just use that because it's the game I just called, and I know what they've gone through scheduling wise. But yeah, has it been a little bit more stressful, a little bit more headaches, of course. But I do think that each team is doing a really good job of pushing through this.
The Big Ten in general. I voted in the preseason, the Athletic, Brendan Quinn, who writes for the Athletic, and Adam Jardy, who writes for the Columbus Dispatch. They're kindly they invite two reporters from each school. I was one of the representatives for Indiana. Picked my order of finish in the preseason of the Big Ten. As I mentioned to you before, my co-host Jared, who's not with us for extended period here, kind of gave me some crap. I think I picked Wisconsin to win the league. Maybe I was biased from the standpoint of, I watched what they did last season down the stretch. Once they got Micah Potter in the lineup, to me, they were the best team in the Big Ten to close the season. They won the Big Ten a piece of the title that last game at Indiana. That was the last game of the year. But the Big Ten, top to bottom, to me, 1 through 8 or 9 is really good. And where do you sit right now in terms of who are the favorites going into the conference season? Who, in your mind, are maybe the 2 or 3 teams that you're looking at and say, one of these teams is likely to win the league?
Yeah, I think it's Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin is in there, Michigan State. I think those are the 4 that are going to compete for that. I think Iowa, with what they're doing, my question mark with them is can they defend? Now, I think they can score, and sometimes you just score more points, you're going to win, but we'll see as far as that goes. But you got your senior leaders. We know what Big Ten plays. Big Ten's experience. A lot of those teams I yelled have what experience? I mean, what Iowa DeSumo was going to do. He can take over a game, and he's clutch, and he can close out games. But Coburn is just as good as we saw against Minnesota, what he did. So you've got that, right? Wisconsin, the senior leaders that they have. Whether they play Nate Reavers and Micah Potter together or if they play them separate, they've got some young freshmen that are coming in there trying to do some things as well. They're going to be really good, especially if they shoot the ball like they did in the second half against Loyola Chicago last night. Michigan State, all right, Joey Hauser, really, really good. But they've got other guys, Aaron Henry, what he's doing. So and it's just Tom Izzo. Let's just be honest, right? They're going to be in the conversation. And then who I gave Wisconsin, Illinois.
Yeah, you gave your
Iowa.
4.
Yeah, I gave the 4. So yeah, I mean those are the 4 that I'm there. Now that's tier 1. Tier 2 is that's when I slide, the Hoosiers into it. Minnesota's into it. I think now did they get embarrassed against Illinois? Yeah, a little bit. But I mean, are they still in a conversation with Marcus Carver on the point guard? Yeah, they're still in a conversation for him. There's no question about that. So there's that next group then of teams that are in the conversation as well. If I'm a Hoosier fan, my goal should be to finish 5 or 6. That's where you should be now. If you're above that, that's a great success. That's a good season because you've got your team with experience, but not as much as everybody else. If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So then you're adding a lot of younger guys into it as well. So I think 5, 6 right through there. I'm sure I forgot some teams that are kind of in that tier 2 as well, but that 5, 6 range, if I'm a Hoosier fan and that's where we finish, you're going to be set up just fine in the NCAA tournament.
The teams I have questions about, and it's not that I don't think they're capable, it's just I haven't seen them tested so far, kind of in that next tier. Ohio State, they've got 5 wins, but they haven't really beaten anybody. They beat Notre Dame.
And EJ Liddell, right? Like he's out. We don't know how long he's out for. What's that going to be? And
Michigan.
Okay, so Michigan, great example. I think Michigan's one of the deeper teams, right? I think what Dickinson could do as a young freshman, a big, who was going to fill the center. They really didn't lose a lot of their outside perimeter guys. They still have Livers. They have Wagner. They've still got Brooke. Like they've got enough of those. But who's going to take Teskey's spot? Who's going to kind of be that?
Xavier Simpson was a big loss too. I mean,
very much so, right? But for me, I think the leader there, yes, but you had enough wing play to kind of overcome some of that. But maybe it's because I'm a big and I'm a little skewed when I look at things. I'm looking big. Who's going to anchor? Who's going to be that guy to rebound the basketball, get stops, protect the rim? So that's where I'm at with it. But I think Michigan's right there as well in that group. I think they're deeper than what a lot of people give them credit for.
How about Rutgers? What any thoughts on them? They're a team. They're a pain to play against. I feel like just in terms of how hard they play, how hard they compete. I mean, they're never easy to play against, and they don't have that household name. But I feel like Ron Harper Jr. this year has a chance to really kind of maybe cement himself as one of the top maybe 10 players in the Big Ten.
Yeah, Ron Harper, Geo Baker. Rutgers is a great team, man. They're a great team because they defend, and their defense leads to some easy baskets. But offensively, I think they've gotten better this year. I think that guys have gotten better individually, and that's made them better as a unit. And I think that's what's key is the ability to do that. And that's where we go back to what we're talking about with the Hoosiers. I mean, if they finish 5-6, that's a great season. I mean, because you got to go over Michigan. You got to play over Rutgers. You got to get wins over Ohio State. Like there's quality teams in that second tier that you have to beat to finish 5 or 6. If you finish 5 or 6, you've had a good year. And I know Hoosier fans don't want to hear that. Now, they don't want to hear that. It's Big Ten championship, not this year. Like you've taken the steps. Like you've gone there. Not saying they can't. Not saying they can't. But it like 5 or 6, in my opinion, would be a pretty darn good year for this Hoosier team. And again, it propels them to what's next.
I want to go back to your playing days at Wisconsin. You obviously won a ton of games, played for a legendary coach in Bo Ryan. What do you remember just about playing in Assembly Hall as a player? I mean, obviously, I joked with you before we hit record about that shot you hit your senior year, the bank shot. I still want to ask you if you called bank on that, but what do you remember about playing in Assembly Hall, and how did it compare to maybe some of the other Big Ten venues that you got a chance to play in?
Yeah, the backboards were nice. I know that they were nice. They had a nice little glare. They were nice and clean. So I knew right where I was going with that. I knew right where. No, of course I didn't yell bank. But my question to you then, Hoosier fans, is: did Eric Gordon yell bank at Illinois?
That was a shot Illinois. That was a shot Eric Gordon deserved after the way they treated him that game, right?
Then that my bank shot was one I deserved. So
yeah, no, I'll give you all the credit in the world on that one. Yeah. I remember that still.
You got to be lucky sometimes in this game. Now I'm a junkie. Like I am a basketball junkie. I love the game. I'll talk the game 24/7. I love playing it. So walking into Assembly Hall, what do I think of right away? You think of all the history. And I took it all in. I mean, my eyes were wide open. I love Assembly. I really do. I love calling games there now. I love playing there. Now it helped. You guys had some really good teams. DJ White, Eric Gore. I mean, these were some really good teams. Calvin Sampson was there my senior year. That was the last. And I know you shake your head a little bit, but he was a coach now.
Yeah, he's a good coach. Really
good, right? And that actually the bank shot was his last game he coached. I believe after that they had to then pull him back, because I know as we were walking out there, I remember we heard like, oh, there might be this going on and this going on and all those other things. So I thought that was the last one that he had. Might be wrong on that, but I loved it. Again, the teams that the Hoosiers had were really good teams. That's what I remember. I remember the battles. Like, we knew we needed to win. We knew we needed to compete against these guys. And then you take it in. Obviously, Bobby Knight, the history that those teams brought in, we know how proud I know how proud Hoosier fans are of that. And you wanted to not let them continue to build on what that already was.
Yeah, I'm looking back. It was actually, let's see, the Indiana-Wisconsin game, February 13th. Wisconsin wins 68-66. Then he coached two more games, Michigan State. They beat Michigan State and Purdue at home, and then that was it. And then Dockich took over the rest of the way, and it kind of spiraled downhill for that. Specifically on Wisconsin basketball, I wanted to ask you two questions that I think is on the mind of that Indiana fans would have. I think it's been since the late 90s since Indiana has won at the Kohl Center. What, as someone that's played there, and it's obviously going to be different this year without fans and attendance, but what makes it such a difficult place to play? I've actually never been there. I've been to a lot of the Big Ten road venues, but haven't been up to Wisconsin. What makes it such a tough place to play? And how has Wisconsin been able to have so much continuity in terms of its success going from Bo Ryan to Greg Gard? I think a lot of people thought maybe there would be a little bit of drop-off. Maybe at first there was a little bit, but now it seems like Greg Gard has things going, maybe not at the exact same level that Bo Ryan did, but he's having a really good success so far at Wisconsin.
Yeah, they're coming off a Big Ten championship.
Yeah, exactly.
They're coming off what could have been probably a pretty deep run in the NCAA tournament as well. So I think Greg's doing a fantastic job. First, to answer your question, what makes it difficult? The players. Like, you got to have good players. And we've had good players at the University of Wisconsin for about 20 years. Good coaching, right? So you got those two things. But they know how to recruit the guys that fit their system. They're not reinventing the wheel. Guys that fit their system and know how to play. But that's one of the biggest reasons that Wisconsin's had success is they've had good players. And as far as what Greg Gard has done, Greg was under Bo for 20, 30 years. Now, Greg's done some things differently than Bo and changed some things. What makes Greg really good and what made Bo really good, and you need this, they're great teachers. They know how to get their message across. Some guys are visual learners. Some guys are guys that have to do it. Some guys need numbers to do it. And that's kind of what they've done is they've set up all three of those so that no matter what, they're still reaching and their messages are getting across to each player. And you see the growth then of each player through the 2, 3, 4 years or 5 years that they're there at Wisconsin. And I think that's, like, again, I say this, there's no secrets. Like, it's pretty simple. Simple works, though. Sometimes coaches, players, fan bases want to have all this over-teaching and emphasize, well, they need to do this. No. Like, if you're having success, don't run from it. If you look at what Bobby Knight did, it was what Bobby did simple? I think so.
Yeah.
Did he have some really good players? Yeah, but it was simple. Like, we want to complicate it. We want to run 9 different offensive sets, and we want to run this. And Wisconsin runs a swing, but they run really, really well, and they get layups off of it. Why change it? So I think it's just kind of that sort of concept.
Brian, I appreciate the time. It was I feel like I could talk to you about hoops all day long. You're a busy man, though. We enjoyed listening to you on the broadcast. Hopefully, you'll have some Indiana games here later in the season, potentially on BTN. What do you have coming up here this week, the next couple of weeks in terms of your broadcast schedule?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun. It's fun to talk, Hoosier basketball. I've got a couple studio appearances, and I've got Ohio State Northwestern. So one of those teams that you don't know kind of what is yet. I've had Ohio State twice. I'll be curious. This is going to be a good one. It's a good test for Ohio State without E.J. Liddell. How long is he going to be gone? Are they going to be able to have enough height down low to kind of compete in the Big Ten? We'll see. We'll find out more about them. But I'm excited about your Hoosiers. It's always good when Indiana basketball is good, right? Like, it's always good. It brings more attention to the Big Ten. The national media loves it. I love it. It's fun. Big Ten basketball is back, which, for me, playing in it, but being a junkie, this is the toughest conference in the country. Like, sit back, enjoy it every night. Don't overreact. If there's a loss, it's going to be a weird year. I know Hoosier fans sometimes like to do that a little bit. Don't overreact. Just breathe a little bit, because this year is going to be that roller coaster, because there is no home court advantage, right? There is no either way. Either way, there's none. So you got to make sure that you're ready for this roller coaster ride, because it is going to be that. It just is. Buckle up. Be ready. Know that you guys have enough talent to compete. And I'm excited to see how it plays out.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks again to Brian, and we'll be back next week on another episode of Podcast on the Brink.